Albert's boots clicked against the polished floor of the interstellar embassy as he entered with an unshakable confidence that belied the gravity of the situation. His sharp green eyes scanned the dimly lit hall, absorbing the diplomatic chaos around him. Human and alien delegations whispered furiously, their faces drawn with fear. The air buzzed with unspoken accusations and the weight of an impending crisis. Standing at the far end of the room was the alien investigator assigned to assist him, Dina. She turned as he approached, her movements fluid and commanding. Her glowing blue skin shimmered under the artificial light, while her vibrant green hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall of emeralds. But it was her eyes, piercing, intelligent, and haunting, that stopped Albert in his tracks. "Detective Albert," Dina greeted, her voice low and steady, laced with authority. "You're late." "Fashionably," he replied, his deep voice edged with sarcasm. He crossed his arms, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over her slender frame. "You must be Dina. Heard a lot about you. The alien genius who doesn't need help." "And yet," she said, tilting her head slightly, her full lips curving into a faint smirk, "I'm here, working with you." Albert bit back a grin, appreciating the fiery confidence she exuded. "Fair enough. What's the situation?" Dina gestured toward a holographic projection that hovered between them. It displayed a gruesome scene. The lifeless body of a blue-skinned alien male sprawled in a high-end hotel suite. The ambassador's chest bore a single, cauterized wound, a perfect circle, as though burned through with precision. Scorch marks radiated outward in intricate patterns, the telltale signs of advanced alien tech. "He was killed last night in Manhattan," Dina said, her tone sharp. "Ambassador Relek of Xyron, my people's most prominent advocate for Earth-Xyron relations. His death, your jurisdiction." Albert frowned, studying the projection. "And you think a human did this?" "I'm not here to point fingers," Dina replied, though her expression betrayed a flicker of doubt. "But the weapon used a plasma disk emitter is a Xyron technology restricted to government officials. It shouldn't even exist on Earth." Albert leaned closer, the proximity drawing an instinctive glance from Dina. "You're suggesting it was stolen?" "Perhaps. Or gifted." The weight of her implication hung heavy in the air. Albert straightened, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just a murder. It's a spark waiting to ignite a war." Dina's lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded. "Exactly. That's why we need to solve this together." The unlikely duo dove into their investigation, each bringing their unique expertise to the table. Albert's street smarts and relentless intuition clashed with Dina's analytical precision and advanced tech knowledge. Their partnership was tense at first, the divide between human and alien approaches often widening during heated exchanges. In one instance, as they examined the crime scene in the sterile, fluorescent glow of the hotel suite, Albert crouched by a bloodless scorch mark near the ambassador's body. He tapped the edge of the pattern with his gloved finger, his brows furrowed. "This isn't random," he muttered. "Looks ritualistic." Dina knelt beside him, her movements impossibly graceful. "Not ritualistic. Xyron energy signatures are coded. This pattern is a message." Albert raised a skeptical brow. "And what's it saying?" "That we're dealing with someone far more dangerous than we thought," Dina murmured, her tone grave. Their investigation took them through the glittering skyline of Manhattan and into its shadowy underbelly. Clues were scarce, but each fragment of evidence they uncovered hinted at a conspiracy reaching beyond Earth and Xyron. Late one evening, in the dimly lit precinct office, Albert caught Dina staring at a holographic reconstruction of the crime scene. Her expression was unreadable, yet something in her posture spoke of grief. "You knew him, didn't you?" Albert asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Dina hesitated, then nodded. "Relek was more than an ambassador. He was a mentor. He believed in a future where our worlds could coexist peacefully." Albert's gaze softened. For all her confidence and poise, he saw the vulnerability beneath. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of quiet solidarity. "We'll find who did this, and they'll pay." Dina turned to him, her piercing green eyes locking onto his. For a moment, the space between them seemed to dissolve, the unspoken understanding forging a fragile bond. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Their search led them deeper into the labyrinth of human and alien politics, unraveling a sinister plot involving rogue factions on both sides. But with every answer came more questions and a growing trust between Albert and Dina that neither could ignore. As they intercepted a coded transmission hinting at the location of a hidden laboratory, Albert turned to Dina, his green eyes blazing with determination. "Looks like we've got a lead, but something tells me this is just the beginning." Dina nodded, her confidence matching his. "Then let's finish what we started." The coded transmission had led Albert and Dina to a derelict warehouse on the fringes of Manhattan, tucked away under the neon haze of the city's industrial district. The building, nondescript from the outside, pulsed faintly with energy, an unnatural hum that sent shivers down Albert's spine. "Looks abandoned," Albert said, stepping out of their unmarked vehicle. His sharp green eyes scanned the area for movement, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his firearm. "But that sound says otherwise." Dina emerged beside him, her presence radiating calm control. Her blue skin glowed faintly in the low light, and her green hair cascaded over the sleek black jumpsuit she wore. "It's not abandoned. That energy signature matches the plasma emitter used in the murder." Albert raised an eyebrow. "What, you got a sixth sense for this kind of thing?" She smirked faintly, holding up a small device that blinked with alien symbols. "Technology, detective, something you could learn to trust." He grinned, his teeth flashing in the dim light. "I trust my gut, and my gut says, whoever's in there isn't rolling out the welcome mat." Dina tilted her head toward him, her gaze steady. "Good, then let's not disappoint them." The warehouse interior was a stark contrast to its exterior, a labyrinth of metallic walls, glowing consoles, and humming equipment. The air was heavy with the acrid tang of burned circuits and the faint hum of alien tech in overdrive. As they crept through the corridors, Dina's device began to pulse faster. She gestured toward a room ahead, her voice a low whisper. "There, the source of the energy signature." Albert nodded, his body taut with readiness. He pushed the door open slowly, revealing a sprawling lab, bathed in eerie blue light. At its center was a table, scattered with alien devices and fragments of tech that looked both futuristic and menacing. And then they saw it, a holographic map displaying Earth-Xyron, linked by pulsating red lines. Beside it was a projection of the ambassador's face, surrounded by symbols neither of them recognized. "Someone's been busy," Albert muttered, his voice tinged with awe. Dina moved closer, her fingers gliding over the console. "These markings, they're coordinates, locations across both worlds." Albert leaned in, his breath warm against her shoulder. "So whoever killed Relek is planning something bigger. A lot bigger." Before Dina could respond, the faint sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Albert spun, gun drawn, just as a figure stepped into the light. Clad in black armor and wielding a weapon that shimmered with alien energy, the intruder raised the weapon without hesitation. Dina reacted first, her agility unmatched. She grabbed Albert's arm, pulling him down as a blast of plasma scorched the air above them. "Move!" she shouted, darting toward cover. Albert followed, his heart pounding. He fired a shot, but the intruder's armor absorbed the bullet with ease. "Your turn, genius," he called to Dina, his tone edged with urgency. Dina's fingers danced over her device, emitting a pulse of energy that disarmed their attacker's weapon. The intruder hesitated for a split second, just enough time for Albert to close the gap. He tackled the figure to the ground, his strength overpowering them. The armored assailant writhed under Albert's grip, but a sharp blow from Dina's baton rendered them unconscious. Albert rolled off, breathing heavily, and glanced at her with a grin. "Nice teamwork." Dina gave him a look, half exasperated, half amused. "You're reckless." "Yeah, but effective," he shot back, still catching his breath. They secured the attacker and examined their armor. A hidden compartment revealed a data drive, its surface engraved with the same symbols from the lab. Dina pocketed it, her expression unreadable. Back at the precinct, they reviewed the data drive, which revealed shocking information. A plan to destabilize Earth-Xyron relations by framing both sides for acts of terrorism. The murder of Ambassador Relek was only the first step in a much larger conspiracy. As they pieced together the evidence, Albert noticed Dina's demeanor shift. Her usual composure gave way to a quiet intensity, her eyes flickering with unspoken emotions. "Talk to me," he said, his tone softer than usual. Dina hesitated, her green eyes meeting his. "This isn't just about politics. It's personal. Relek, he wasn't just my mentor. He was my friend. And now I'm realizing how deep this conspiracy runs." Albert reached out, his hand brushing hers. The touch was brief, but electric, a moment that sent a ripple of awareness through both of them. "We'll get them, Dina. Whoever's behind this, they don't stand a chance against us." She smiled faintly, the vulnerability in her gaze, tempered by resolve. "You're surprisingly good at this whole motivational thing." Albert smirked. Don't get used to it. The bond between them had shifted, the tension giving way to a quiet understanding. As they prepared to follow their next lead, a mysterious contact in the Nevada desert, the spark between them grew stronger. Unspoken, but undeniable. The case was heating up, and so was the connection between Albert and Dina. The journey ahead promised danger, deception, and revelations that would test them both. But one thing was clear. They were in this together. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the moonlit sky, its vast expanse punctuated by jagged peaks and whispering winds. The coordinates they had extracted from the attacker's data drive led them to a secluded research outpost. It stood like a monolith in the barren landscape, its metal exterior glinting ominously under the stars. Albert and Dina approached cautiously, their vehicle parked at a safe distance. The night was quiet except for the crunch of sand underfoot and the distant howl of a coyote. Looks abandoned, Albert muttered, his voice low. He glanced at Dina, whose device was scanning the building for energy signatures. But I'm guessing it's not. It's active, Dina confirmed, her tone clipped. Minimal movement inside, but the energy readings are spiking. Whatever they're doing in there, it's big. Albert grinned, the kind of reckless excitement that Dina had grown to anticipate. Big sounds like our kind of problem. Dina gave him a sidelong look, her green eyes glinting in the moonlight. Let's try to avoid the kind of big that gets us killed. They moved toward the facility, blending into the shadows with practiced precision. Albert's human instincts and Dina's technological prowess made for an unexpectedly effective duo. When they reached the main entrance, Dina produced a small tool, its sleek design humming with alien energy. Let me guess, Albert said, watching her work. That thing slices, dices, and makes toast too? Dina didn't look up, but a faint smile tugged at her lips. It also bypasses security systems. Maybe I'll let you borrow it. The door hissed open, revealing a stark corridor bathed in pale artificial light. They slipped inside, their movements synchronized, a rhythm born from trust, forged under fire. The facility was eerily silent, but every corner hinted at secrets. Alien tech lined the walls, glowing faintly, while human equipment hummed alongside it. The fusion of the two was seamless and unsettling, a testament to the shadowy cooperation they were uncovering. This place feels wrong, Albert said, his voice a whisper. He gestured to a console displaying streams of alien text. What are they doing here? Dina's fingers flew across the console, her green hair falling forward as she focused. The holographic display shifted, revealing schematics for a device that made her blood run cold. They're building a mimic weapon, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This kind of technology can replicate attacks to make it look like someone else did it. The perfect tool for starting a war. Albert's jaw tightened. And they've got both human and alien hands in the cookie jar. This isn't just a rogue group. This is a damn conspiracy. Before Dina could respond, a clattering sound echoed down the corridor. They both froze, their senses on high alert. Dina extinguished the hologram, and Albert motioned for her to follow as they ducked into a side room. Inside, they found rows of containment pods, each one housing a figure bathed in an eerie blue glow. Some were human, others alien, their faces slack as if in stasis. What the hell is this? Albert whispered, his voice thick with unease. Experiments, Dina replied, her tone grim. They're studying us, both of us. Albert's fists clenched, his green eyes burning with anger. This just got personal. A voice from behind made them both spin, weapons drawn. Drop your weapons, or I'll make sure neither of you leaves alive. The speaker was a tall figure clad in sleek armor, their face obscured by a visor. But the voice, deep and cold, carried a weight of authority. You've already seen too much. Albert stepped forward, his gun steady despite the odds, and we're not leaving until we've seen it all. The standoff was tense, the air crackling with anticipation. But before the figure could make their move, Dina activated a device on her wrist, sending a pulse of energy through the room. The lights flickered, and the armored figure staggered, their visor sparking. Albert lunged, disarming the attacker in one swift motion. Dina followed, pinning the figure against the wall with a force that belied her slender frame. Who's behind this? Dina demanded, her voice icy. The figure's visor flickered, revealing a human face beneath. He smirked, blood trickling from his lip. You think you're saving your worlds? You're just pawns in a game you don't understand. Albert slammed him against the wall. Try us. But before they could press further, an alarm blared, and the facility plunged into chaos. The figure's smirk widened. Too late. Dina cursed under her breath, grabbing Albert's arm. "We need to move. Now." They fled through the labyrinthine corridors as armed guards closed in, the facility erupting into a cacophony of shouts and gunfire. Albert's sharp reflexes and Dina's quick thinking kept them ahead of their pursuers, but the odds were overwhelming. As they reached the exit, a burst of gunfire clipped Albert's shoulder. He stumbled, pain flashing across his face, but Dina was there in an instant, her strength surprising as she helped him forward. "Not dying here," she muttered, her tone fierce. They burst into the open desert, their escape vehicle just ahead. Dina's device activated the engine remotely, and they dove inside as a hail of plasma fire rained down behind them. The vehicle roared to life, speeding away into the night. Inside, Albert slumped against the seat, blood seeping through his shirt. Dina's hands hovered over his wound, her expression torn between concern and determination. "You're reckless," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Yeah," he replied with a weak grin, "but effective." Their eyes met, the unspoken tension between them crackling like static electricity. For a moment, the chaos around them faded, leaving only the connection that had been building since the moment they met. "Thank you," Albert said softly. Dina's lips curved into a faint smile. "Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started." As the desert stretched out before them, the stars above seemed closer than ever. Their mission had only grown more dangerous, but so had their bond a spark that neither of them could ignore. The adrenaline from their narrow escape still coursed through Albert's veins as the vehicle tore through the desert night. The stars above seemed indifferent to the storm, brewing between Earth and Xyron, but in the confines of the cabin, another tempest was raging, one of emotions neither Albert nor Dina could contain. Dina's hands trembled slightly as she tended to Albert's wound. The sterile hum of her portable medical device filled the silence, its glow reflecting in her intense green eyes. She had stripped back the torn fabric of his shirt to expose the gash across his muscular shoulder. "This is going to sting," she warned, though her voice betrayed an uncharacteristic softness. Albert smirked, his green eyes meeting hers. "I can handle it." The moment her device sealed the wound, a jolt of pain shot through him, but he refused to flinch. Dina's gaze lingered on him, and for a fleeting moment, she saw through the confident facade to the man beneath the relentless, stubborn, and unexpectedly tender detective who had become her partner. "You really are reckless," she murmured, her tone laced with a mix of exasperation and admiration. "Charging headfirst into danger without a plan." Albert chuckled, the sound low and rough. "I had a plan. It just didn't survive contact with reality." Dina shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "You're impossible." "Yeah, but you're still here," he said, his voice softening. His words hung in the air, weighted with unspoken meaning. Their eyes locked, the tension between them thicker than the desert heat. Neither spoke, but the air crackled with the intensity of emotions they had buried beneath their mission. Albert's hand, rough and strong, reached out, brushing a strand of her emerald hair behind her ear. The contact sent a shiver down her spine. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why risk so much for people you barely know?" Albert's expression turned serious, his green eyes darkening. "Because someone has to. Because if we don't fight for what's right, who will?" Dina's breath caught, the sincerity in his words breaking through her carefully constructed walls. She leaned back, trying to regain her composure, but Albert reached for her hand, his touch firm yet gentle. "You don't have to do this alone, Dina," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Whatever this is, whatever we're up against, we're in it together." The moment stretched, the unspoken bond between them growing stronger with each passing second. But before either could say more, the vehicle jolted as it hit a patch of uneven terrain. The interruption shattered the moment, bringing them back to the reality of their mission. Dina pulled her hand away, her cheeks flushed. "We're approaching the rendezvous point," she said, her voice steady but clipped. "The contact might have answers." Albert nodded, sensing the shift, but unwilling to press further. The desert soon gave way to an isolated canyon, its craggy walls casting long shadows under the moonlight. They parked the vehicle and moved cautiously toward a small encampment hidden within the rocks. The contact was waiting, a Xyron informant named Carol. His blue skin etched with faint scars that spoke of a life lived on the edge. He rose as they approached, his piercing gaze sweeping over them. "You brought trouble with you," Carol said, his tone sharp. "We brought answers," Albert countered, his voice steady. "And we need more." Carol's eyes flicked to Dina, a faint flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You've come a long way, investigator. I didn't think you'd have the courage." Dina stiffened, her expression icy. "This isn't about courage. It's about justice." Carol nodded, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "The conspiracy runs deep. Both Earth and Xyron factions are involved powerful people who profit from chaos. The mimic weapon is only one piece of their plan. There's more, something far worse." "What are they planning?" Albert demanded. Carol hesitated, glancing around as if the very rocks might betray him. "An attack. They want to stage an incident that will force Earth and Xyron into open conflict. The target is a peace summit in 2 days. If they succeed, it'll mean war." The weight of his words hit them like a tidal wave. Dina's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the conspiracy. Albert clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he processed the scale of the threat. "We'll stop them," Albert said, his voice filled with steely resolve. Carol's lips twisted into a grim smile. "You'll need more than resolve, detective. You'll need each other." The words lingered as Carol handed Dina a data chip containing the summit's details. Before they could question him further, a distant rumble echoed through the canyon. Lights appeared on the horizon, growing brighter by the second. "They've found us," Carol said, his voice urgent. "Go, now." Albert and Dina sprinted back to their vehicle, the tension between them replaced by the singular focus of survival. Plasma bolts lit up the night as enemy forces closed in, their vehicles roaring like predators on the hunt. Albert took the wheel, his hands steady despite the chaos. Dina activated a defensive system, her alien tech creating a shimmering shield that deflected incoming fire. The chase was relentless, the desert becoming a battleground as the conspirators sought to eliminate them. As they careened through a narrow pass, Albert glanced at Dina, his green eyes blazing with determination. "No matter what happens, we finish this." Dina met his gaze, her voice unwavering. Together, their bond had become unbreakable, forged in the crucible of danger and driven by a shared mission. The conspiracy loomed larger than ever, but so did their resolve to stop it, and the spark between them burned brighter with every passing moment. The safe house in the outskirts of the Arizona desert was a stark contrast to the chaos they had escaped. Its interior was minimalistic, illuminated by soft, ambient lighting that gave it a strangely intimate atmosphere. Albert secured the doors, while Dina set up the data chip Carol had given them, her fingers gliding across the console with practiced ease. "This chip could break the case wide open," she said, her voice focused, but Albert could hear the weariness underlying her words. She hadn't stopped since they began their hunt for Relek's killer, her determination relentless and consuming. "Take a breath, Dina," Albert said, walking over to her. His shoulders still throbbed from the earlier wound, but he ignored it. "We've got a lead. We'll get there." She glanced up at him, her piercing green eyes betraying a flicker of vulnerability. "I can't stop. Not until this is over." Albert placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You've carried a lot on your own for too long. You're not alone in this anymore." The words seemed to soften her, and for a moment, Dina let herself breathe. "I wasn't sure about you at first," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "But you've proven me wrong." Albert chuckled softly, his hand lingering just a second too long. "Guess I'm full of surprises." Their gazes locked, the air between them charged with an intensity neither could ignore. But before they could dwell on it, the console chimed, displaying a stream of data that quickly formed a holographic map of the Peace Summit. The display highlighted security breaches and vulnerable points where the conspirators planned to strike. "They're targeting the main hall," Dina said, her tone sharp. "During the signing of the agreement, they'll frame it as an attack from Xyron dissidents." Albert studied the map, his green eyes narrowing. "We've got the what, but we still don't have the who." As Dina navigated through the files, she froze. A name appeared, sending a visible tremor through her. Albert noticed the change instantly. "What is it?" "It's someone I trusted," Dina admitted, her voice tight. "An old colleague. We worked together on interstellar security." Albert moved closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "It doesn't matter who they were to you. What matters is stopping them." She nodded, but her shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of the revelation. Albert stepped closer, his proximity drawing her out of her turmoil. "Hey," he said softly, "you don't have to carry this alone." Dina turned to him, her green eyes meeting his. The vulnerability in her gaze was matched by the quiet strength in his. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment stretched between them, the intensity of their shared mission giving way to something deeper. Albert's hand brushed against hers, the contact sending a jolt through both of them. Neither pulled away. "I've never met anyone like you," Albert said, his voice low, his green eyes searching hers. "You're incredible." Dina's breath hitched, her own barriers crumbling under the weight of his words. She stepped closer, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "Albert, Her words faltered as their faces inched closer, the magnetic pull between them undeniable. Albert's hand cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Dina's fingers found his injured shoulder, her touch feather-light but charged with emotion. Their lips met in a kiss that was slow and tentative at first, but quickly deepened as the tension that had been simmering between them finally erupted. Albert's strength and passion met Dina's dominance and confidence, their differences blending seamlessly as they lost themselves in the moment. Dina pulled back slightly, her green eyes shimmering. "This doesn't change the mission," she said, though her voice was breathless. Albert grinned, his hand still cradling her face. "Number. But it makes it a hell of a lot better." She laughed softly, the sound like music in the quiet room. For a moment, the weight of the conspiracy seemed to lift, replaced by the connection they had found in each other. But the reprieve was short-lived. The console chimed again, a new file unlocking with damning evidence, a detailed plan that named the conspirators and their next steps. Among the names was a high-ranking Earth official who had been a vocal proponent of peace, a shocking betrayal that made Dina's stomach churn. Albert's grin faded as he read the file. "Looks like we've got our who." "And our next move," Dina said, her resolve hardening. "We stop them before they can make it to the summit." Albert nodded, his green eyes blazing with determination. Together, the intensity of their mission burned brighter than ever, but so did the bond between them. The closer they got to solving the case, the more they realized how much they needed each other, not just to stop the conspiracy, but to face whatever came next. The Peace Summit loomed over the heart of Washington, D.C., an architectural masterpiece that symbolized hope for Earth and Xyron relations. Its glass facade shimmered under the midday sun, a beacon of unity, one that now served as the conspirators' target. Albert and Dina stood in the shadows of a nearby building, finalizing their plan. "This is it," Albert said, his green eyes scanning the bustling scene. Delegates from both worlds mingled, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. "If we screw this up, we're looking at interstellar war." "We won't," Dina replied, her tone resolute. Her green eyes burned with determination, her alien tech arrayed around her like a soldier's arsenal. "We've come too far to fail now." The data from Carol's chip had not only revealed the conspirators' plan, but also their key operatives. Among them was Dina's former colleague, Xyronian security officer Talrek, and Earth's Deputy Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, Jonathan Reese. Both were in the building, coordinating the final stages of the attack. Albert adjusted the earpiece, linking him to Dina. "We take them down quietly. No grand heroics." Dina smirked faintly. "You're learning." As they infiltrated the summit, the tension was palpable. Albert's human instincts guided them through the human-dominated security zones, while Dina's advanced tech bypassed alien systems with ease. Their partnership was seamless, forged through fire and bound by trust. Inside, the summit hall buzzed with anticipation. Diplomats and leaders filled the space, their voices mingling in a symphony of languages. Overhead, a massive holographic display counted down to the signing ceremony, a moment meant to symbolize peace, now threatened by betrayal. Albert's voice crackled through Dina's earpiece. "I've got eyes on Reese. He's near the podium, acting like he owns the place." "I've got Talrek," Dina replied, her gaze fixed on the blue-skinned Xyronian, standing near the control panel for the holographic display. His posture was tense, his hands moving with deliberate precision. "He's rigging the system to broadcast a fake Xyron attack." Albert's voice was grim. "Then we hit them now." The plan unfolded with precision. Albert approached Reese, blending into the crowd before confronting the deputy secretary with quiet menace. "Jonathan Reese," he said, his voice low but cutting. "You're under arrest." Reese's face paled, but he recovered quickly, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Detective Albert, you're out of your jurisdiction." Albert leaned closer, his green eyes hard as steel. "Funny thing about justice, it doesn't care about jurisdiction." Reese made a move for his communicator, but Albert was faster. In one swift motion, he twisted Reese's arm behind his back, securing him with cuffs before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, Dina approached Talrek, her heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. "Talrek," she said, her voice sharp, "step away from the console." Talrek froze, his green eyes widening as he turned to face her. "Dina, I didn't think you'd be the one to find me." "I trusted you," she said, her voice trembling with anger and pain. "You were supposed to protect our people, not use them." Telrex sighed, his expression a mix of regret and defiance. "Our people need strength, Dina, not unity with a species that will never understand us. And this is your solution?" Dina gestured to the console, her tone scathing. "Murder, war, destruction. It's the only way," Telrex replied, his voice rising. "You're too blind to see it." Before he could activate the console, Dina lunged, her alien agility giving her the edge. The two clashed in a flurry of movement, their combat as much emotional as physical. Dina's fury and heartbreak fueled her, and she eventually overpowered him, pinning him against the console. "It ends here," she said, her voice cold as ice. Telrex looked up at her, a flicker of resignation in his eyes. "You've chosen your side. I've chosen peace," Dina replied, cuffing him as security forces swarmed the room. With Reese and Telrex detained, the summit resumed. Albert and Dina stood at the back of the hall, watching as the peace agreement was signed amid thunderous applause. The weight of their victory settled over them, bittersweet and profound. Outside, under the twilight sky, Albert turned to Dina. "We did it." She nodded, her expression pensive. "But at a cost." Albert placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You made the right choice, Dina. We both did." Her green eyes met his, a spark of warmth breaking through the sorrow. "I couldn't have done it without you," Albert smirked. "Don't get used to saying that." She laughed softly, the sound easing the tension between them. As the night deepened, they stood together, two worlds united by their actions and by the bond they had forged in the shadows. The peace summit had ended, and the world was quiet again, at least for the moment. Albert and Dina found themselves on the rooftop of a hotel overlooking the glowing Washington skyline. The air was crisp, the stars above scattered like diamonds against an inky black sky. Albert leaned against the railing, his green eyes fixed on the horizon. "You'd think saving two worlds would feel, I don't know, bigger." Dina stood beside him, her emerald hair catching the faint light of the city. "Sometimes the biggest victories are the quietest ones." He turned to her, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "You always know how to say the right thing, don't you?" She met his gaze, her green eyes shimmering with something unspoken. "Not always."